with the strategy today, what do you think went well? We'll start with that.
Um, One, I think they did a pretty good job with the complexity of the text. It was a little bit more difficult than ones we've used in the past. I was clearly able to see which kids were understanding it and which ones weren't, and who I would need to go back and kind of work with, maybe in a smaller group and practice a little bit more, or maybe even change the level of the text. But in general, as a whole, I think they did pretty well. And what I liked most was the kids that clearly understood the article were able to defend it, which then would help some of the kids that maybe were confused on some of the issues.
I agree. I definitely think it was easy to distinguish today who understood the text versus who didn't understand the text, especially like who was being called on. I think it was evident. The text was more difficult, so I think we have to keep that into consideration based on yesterday was a little bit easier. I think that our leaders did a great job with really taking over the management of the strategy and the process. We had to say very little.
Mhm.
So I think we accomplished our goal with that. As far as student learning, I think we took them, some of them from emerging, but most from developing into meeting or exceeding for sure. I think it was evident to see who was exceeding as far as understanding that text again, and who was needing some additional development. And I guess I would ask, how are you going to see that moving forward, looking at those students, not only the assessment, because that was a piece of it as I was walking around, the kiddos that struggled with the assessment and then were called on, you could see both in the verbal and the assessment that they were still struggling a little bit. What would you do next for the next piece of this when I leave during, after the coaching cycle after this week?
Well, I think,
What's your next step?
well, the students that I identified that were struggling were the ones that I meet with regularly in that morning intervention time.
Okay.
So I think maybe just, the articles that we're reading, take this strategy and apply it to those articles, because those articles are at a lower level, and so they can practice it on there, and then they'll be more successful. And then as they progress, they'll be able to apply it when they get to text that's, either on grade level or a little bit more challenging. Because when we've been doing these, they've been pretty much right on level.
Right.
So for some, it's been a challenge all along, and then pushing others at the same time.
And I think that's a risk we took at the beginning when we were trying to decide if we were going to differentiate the articles, if we were going to do a grade level lower with text, or if we were truly going to do on grade level text, and knowing that we would have a handful of kids struggling and that we would need to continue to work with them as we move forward. Is there anything that, as you do move forward working with those kids in the small group, how do you see me fitting in the future, as far as, is there anything I can do, follow up, coming back in, or any piece that you see it would be a next natural piece to teaching this strategy?
Well, I think this ties in with what you started at the beginning of the year with Marzano's vocabulary. You kind of introduced that to us, so they've been working on that. Now they have another strategy that they can use even on their own, or with partners or whatever it may be. So again, I think just coming back in, it seems like our focus has been vocabulary to help with the reading and comprehension. I think continuing that, would be helpful, and maybe just check it in. How's keep it a junkie? Kind of keep it alive, sort of. And then if we have other strategies that come along to add to it, because they might be more successful with one strategy as opposed to another. But just keeping them honest still as they're reading and learning and applying this through everything that they're working on.
Right, you were already doing a lot of the vocabulary strategies like we had talked about with Marzano's, and I think this is just another way to add something kind of to your toolkit and another strategy the kids can use. And I agree that some strategies work better, especially with some of your kiddos, than others. So it's just for the kids that like this particular strategy, I think it will definitely assist them, and it'll be a nice resource for the others. When we have our, I could see meeting one more time and going over this last piece of data. We did get the assessment yesterday and looked at that, and we had a strong 85% with that. But I'd like to see, because it seemed like they were right on with identifying that vocabulary, I'd like to look at this final piece and look over it with you and see what that final percentage is as our ending mark. I think that we met our goals. I think you agree.
Yeah, I had the one kid that had like pulled me aside, who's one of the struggling readers, and had made the comment he was getting upset because all of his words were getting taken. That he wanted to say, "Oh,
I heard the comment,
I want that. I want that was my word." And so I was glad to see that he had some of the same words that were up there. So that showed that he was starting to get on the right path. And other kids kind of use that as an assessment on their own to see if their words are up there or not. So that was helpful in his case, at least.
I think that we didn't say this yesterday, but something I noticed today and yesterday is that even the kids that are struggling with the strategy, I think, feel empowered because they're part of the process, and everybody is part of that process. They know in the audience they're just as important as the leaders, and they've really had an equal voice, and I think they've appreciated that everybody has had participation in this process. And one thing I noticed yesterday particularly is if they had the same word or they identified the same word and they were on the same page with somebody in their group, they were giving high fives and thumbs up. There were a lot of compliments, and I think that really helped build that with the students, that camaraderie and that environment. And I think if we didn't have that environment established, they wouldn't have been able to be so successful. And I don't mean just identifying the vocabulary, but being able to take the risks that they did in
there
front
was
of their
never,
peers.
why did you pick that word or anything like that. They just were agreeing, and then they would disagree or not. But it was also, I think, through the whole process up to today, having the kids, we had the different leaders every time, giving some of those that normally wouldn't have a chance to lead, to still lead and practice that, and kind of be in a role that maybe they're not comfortable in or that they're used to being in. So this kind of gave them a chance to to grow that way as well.
I agree, and I could see that you carrying this forward even before you give a choice of strategies is letting a few other people that maybe didn't want to be leaders before and taking that opportunity within the class when you're reading something to do that strategy. I think they're going to want to continue it. So I appreciate all the work you've done and working with me and being willing to take a risk to be in a cycle.
Thanks.
And I appreciated working with your kids. So I will talk to you about
You're welcome
meeting
anytime.
Post-conference.
Tonight over dinner.
Yeah, that's what we talk about. Cool.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.